There's another handout from the Book of Falmouth that describes the history of Falmouth Heights. We thought that would be interesting for people that may not know, so they're there for you to take.
There's also a sign-in sheet.
And if you want to get some information from us, we don't have your email, so if you want to give it to us, we're creating a database.
So, just so you know, right here, it's like they block the camera.
This is a regular public meeting. Meeting for us, so we have to open the meeting as if it was a regular historical commission meeting, so that's what we're going for. So it's 6 o'clock, it's August 3rd. This historical commission meeting is public hearing on the potential Crown Circle Historic Informational Meeting. So, let's get started. I'm Ed Hadhead. I'm the chairman of the Historical Commission. This is our board. There's most of our board. Annie Dean on the right, Tamsin George, Johanna Reed, the Mason Locuts, April Mirren, our secretary, Jed Kornak is the town planner, and Melissa Tondera is the new assistant town planner. Just got promoted on August 1st. So this is the crew that supports
3 whole
what we
days.
do in town hall. We're a volunteer board. It's on. Lights on. Let me get started here. So who are we? I said I introduced you who the board comprises of. We're volunteers. We're all volunteers. We're not employees of the town. We have limited terms, and we do this because we love the town. It's our interest. It's our passion. That's why we do it. We don't get paid for it. We're not on commission for how many hearings we have or how many historic districts we have. We just love this town, and we think that there's so much potential, and there's so much historic potential and historic assets that we're trying to preserve. The town has no other board that protects those historic assets other than the Historical Commission, so if we're not out there advocating to try to protect what we've got, we're going to lose it all someday. And we love your neighborhood. You know, that's why you're here, and that's why we're making this proposal to you. We meet monthly. We review about 80 applications a year. So when you think that there are 7 historic districts now in Falmouth, and there's probably over 1,000 houses in those districts, you can see that when you have a historic district, there's not necessarily a lot of change that's going on there. And the type of change that we're interested in is really not everything that goes on when somebody with a homeowner. So we do about 80 per year for exterior work only. So what's a historic district? A historic district is very simply a section of town or a city which contains older buildings considered valuable for historic or architectural reasons. There are 7 historic districts in Falmouth, like I said. I don't know if you're familiar with all of them, but these have been in existence. The historic district bylaw was adopted in Falmouth in 1975, so they've been here for a long time. This isn't a new thing. The last historic district, I believe, was probably adopted, I think it was Quistit in maybe 1998, but But other than that, they've been around a long time, so we've lived with them for quite a while. We know, and we have this down pretty pat as to what we do. These are just some pictures that we took from our historic districts, just to give you a flavor of the different characters in the different historic districts. The Falmouth, this is the manse in Falmouth Village on the Green. This is a home in West Falmouth, and that's a home in Woods Hole. There's a lot of different styles of homes. There's not one style only. Like I said, we're not trying to create a museum here. There's many different types of home which have evolved over the years. Change is good. We embrace change because it's natural. And we understand that. We know that change is natural. It's good for our community. It gives you diversity. So that's what you'll see here in the districts. So why Crown Circle, which is why you're here? The Crown Circle neighborhood to us is very unique in that it has managed to maintain its historic charm and character. That's very unusual in Falmouth today. You see a lot of change going on in Falmouth today. You see it going on in your neighbors in Falmouth Heights. There's a lot of change that's been going on there over the years. But somehow the Circle area has resisted that change. And we obviously believe it's because you, the residents, love what you have and you want to maintain it. It's important. Of the 92 homes in the Crown Circle area, 75 homes are historic based on their age. That's 80%. Now that age is we take it from the assessor's database where they have the age of the home. Now that doesn't mean that there haven't been changes or additions or some modifications over the years. There has. But the basic houses, 80% of them are still historic based on their original date. That's incredible. That was really an incredible find that really struck me when I looked this all up. As I said, Falmouth is changing rapidly. Sometimes for the good, sometimes not for the good. And change does happen. But the important thing is what we'd like to do here is we like to manage that change. We don't stop change. We encourage change. Change is good, like I said. But we'd like to manage it so that we maintain the best parts of that neighborhood or that district or that home. We make sure that those remain and they don't change by mistake. So how will a historic district protect Crown Circle? Let me just say for a second, the Crown Circle name, that's a name that we have adopted. It was based on certain Crown Street and Crown Avenue, sorry. And I just started calling it the Crown Circle. That's the name that we put to it. That's just so you know where it came from. It's our moniker. A historic district ensures that the existing character of a neighbor is maintained. And this is important, the next point. A historic district is not a museum. That's not what we try to do. A historic district is a dynamic, changing place where people live, changes happen. We know that. It's just managing that change in a way that you don't lose the character that you love so much. That's the big difference. A historic district is designed to preserve the architectural and distinctive features of a neighborhood that have survived the test of time. It is not to stop change. It is not to create a museum. We don't preserve houses. That's not our mission in the Historical Commission. The Historic District Guidelines are posted on our webpage. They're very clear. We try to be very transparent. There's no secrets. It's not arbitrary when we have a hearing and what the guidelines we like to see people follow. It's very transparent, so no secrets. Now this is the area that we are calling Crown Circle. This is the neighborhood. As you can see, it goes all the way from Clinton Avenue over to Chapel Park and includes the circle and the maze of streets that make up this area. So this is what we've proposed, and this is what, when I talk about the 92 homes, I've counted every home in this, gone through every street and surveyed, and that's the 92 homes that we're talking about, is this district here. Now, we know that there's, within that district, there's not every one of them is a historic home. We know that. There's hotel, there's a condominium in here, there's some commercial buildings. We understand that. But that doesn't mean this isn't still a neighborhood, and the character overall is still there. Now, this is that same map, and what we've taken is we've colored it so that you can get a sense of what we're looking at as far as the historic character of the neighborhood. And this is the color coded to when the houses were built, again, based on the GIS system. Yeah, yeah.
Sure, that's not accurate.
Well,
My house in that looks like it was maybe the 1800s it was.
well, that's what the GIS system says. That's all we can. Okay, then I'm not questioning you. I'm just saying our information simply comes from the town's GIS system. That's all we have to go by.
The assessor says it's 1924, that says it's 1800s.
Okay, well, maybe we made a colored mistake on there. Yeah, okay. Okay, but even at 1924, it's still, we would be considered a historic house based on our guidelines. Okay, so you can see though overall that a great portion of this neighborhood is still intact from its original origins when this area was laid out and planned in the late 1800s. That's when, if you read the story, this was a planned, I'll call it a planned neighborhood. It was laid out, and the configuration of these streets was laid out specifically, and in the heights it was laid out in grids. In this area it was laid out in circles to go up to the highest point there on the top of the hill. So this was all planned, and it's very much exactly the way it was when it first started in about the 1870s. So what are the benefits? That's the key here. What do you get out of this? You're in control of the neighborhood. Now you might say, well, you're not in control, we are, but that's not true. You're gonna make the decision, or you could make the decision that you want to keep your neighborhood the way it is. You know that you'll see the guidelines, they're very visible to you. Then you'll know how we operate. We want you to, that's why we're here, is we want you to know how we operate. And making those decisions, if you make that decision to make this a historic district, well, you have made the decision that you want to preserve your neighborhood. Because without that decision, there's nothing else that will protect your neighborhood from change. Nothing. You can't control your neighbors across the street, next door. You may know them. They might be your best friends today, but in 2 years you might not know who's living there, and you don't know what they're going to do with that property. You don't know that there's a lot of tear downs going on. We've just approved a couple of tear downs throughout the town. It's happening. Property is valuable. Your area is valuable. You're near the water. It's even more valuable. People will buy a small lot and they'll put a 3-story house so they can see the ocean. It's happening. We just had one on Crescent. So change is inevitable. It's just managing that change in a way that you want it is what the key to this is. And like I said, by making the election to a historic district, you're in control of your neighborhood. The design guidelines are very clear. We're very transparent. There's no arbitrary decisions made in our meetings. We don't change our decisions based on some arbitrary change. It doesn't change because the board members change. They're in writing for all to see. Those guidelines were put together through public meetings over several years. We change them periodically. We add things. We add synthetic materials. We add new materials. We're continually updating it, but they're for you to see it at any point in time. There's demolition guidelines within a historic district. A house can be demolished in a historic district if it's justified. You know, there's houses that are just in such bad shape that they can't be rehabilitated. They just can't be. I mean, we do see them all the time. But if a house is demolished, what's going to replace that house is certainly going to be to maintain the characteristics of the neighborhood. We're going to ensure that it fits into the neighborhood. That's what we do. We will approve the demolition, but we also review the plans to make sure that it protects your neighborhood. Otherwise, you can't protect that. The planning board, when they approve a property, does not review design. No one will review designs other than the Historic Commission. That's the only board in town that reviews design. So anything could go onto a property that is not in a historic district today. Public and abutter transparency. Part of our bylaw says that your neighbors have to be notified when changes are being made, structural changes are being made to the exterior. So if someone wants to put a fence or they want to put a third story onto their building, you're going to be notified. And you may not object to it, but you're still going to know. There's not going to be any surprises. You can come to our public hearings. You can have input into it, pro or con, because this is your neighborhood. You're in control of it, and you have a say in it. And as I said, the whole purpose of this is really to preserve the character of your neighborhood. This is the only way that you can have control over that preservation. So how does a historic district get created? Public outreach, this is what we're, oh, so, sorry, yeah.
If there is something to be notified,
Decide individually that we're not interested in that change.
You come to a public hearing.
Okay, but what's consensus? Is it just one person who disagrees with what's happening? Or
Well-
does it need to be 51% of the people disagree?
No, it depends. If you come in with a position that you don't like the change, you present your argument, the board will consider it. That's why we have it. That's why we have public commentary, because we want to hear input. You're affected by change. So if someone wants to put a 6-foot fence in and you're the next door neighbor and say, wait a minute, that's going to block all of my view, I can't see the water anymore, the board is going to take that into consideration. And they may say, well, wait a minute, we have to consider, again, we're considering the whole neighborhood at all time. We're not looking at one house, we're considering what's best for the neighborhood. That's the good part of it. If somebody's doing something and you're in support of it, you can come in and be in support of it as well. Yeah.
I just want to register that we already get notified as abutters. There's been construction on my street, and I have been notified as an abutter. I've been asked for public comment. So the additional level here, it's not like it doesn't exist. Some of us are in conservation districts as well as in pre-existing non-conforming planning districts, and so we get notified for at least 2 hearings, sometimes the third for the Board of Health if septic is involved.
But not for design purposes.
We've been asked to comment on design, and in fact, I have seen the plans for neighboring house where they have to show how the views are affected and so forth. So I just want to register,
Yeah.
this is not the only way that we have abutters' rights.
Okay. So any other questions before I move into this part? You know, where we have some comments? Okay. So we have the public outreach, which is what you're doing now. We had a Zoom meeting in June. This is a public meeting. Our regular monthly meetings now for the next few months will always have something about this to be discussed within the board. That's a public hearing. Anyone can come and have input into that again. If you want, you leave here, you think of questions, you want to make some comments, that's a public meeting, that's what it will be for. This is going to be an open discussion for a while. So that's what we're trying to do, is be as public as we can with the neighborhood as to what's going on. There's no surprises. There will be no surprises. Nothing's going to be sleight of hand or go on behind your back. This is all going to be out in the open with your involvement with it. We're going to look for neighborhood consensus. We want to get a feeling what the neighborhood thinks about this. You know, what do you think about the proposal? You know, do you think it's a benefit for you to preserve what you have? we're going to come to you at some point in time soon and ask what you think, through some kind of a consensus form we're going to put together. So we're going to look for that as well. We want your feedback. Once we get that, assuming that it's positive, I mean, we know it's not going to be 100% positive, nothing ever is. But if we get the sense that a good number of people in the neighborhood are in favor of this, then we go to the select board. And we have to present it to the select board and get their approval. We tell them what we're intending to do. We can tell them about how we went about informing the public about what we're doing. We'll tell them about the consensus that we've received. They're going to be interested in all of that. And
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Could you just elaborate on consensus, what you mean?
we want to get your input. Yes? Sorry?
Process by which you solicit consensus
We're,
from people who are not necessarily full-time residents. As you know, this is a summer.
right. Yep.
So many people aren't represented in the town government because they vote elsewhere. Please explain.
Please explain how you are going to assess who gets to weigh in, how you're going to do that, and what would be your determination of what consensus.
Every homeowner will get solicited. We have the address of every homeowner, whether it's in Falmouth or not in Falmouth. They get tax bills. So we have everyone's address. The letters we sent out the first time went to everyone, not just summer residents. Well, then your address must be wrong in the system. We'll have to check on it for you. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So again, we can only go by the information that's in our computers. But the point is, we write to every homeowner. So if there's a renter wouldn't get it, obviously. It's to the people on record who's the homeowner. So everyone will get a consensus form. We're going to put together some kind of a survey with the questions, probably 4 or 5 questions that will be specific. Are you in favor of this? I mean, that's the kind of thing. It's going to be very simple. It's going to be very simple and straightforward.
But I guess that's the question. What is consensus? If you get 15% saying they're interested, do you feel empowered to move forward? Or should it be 50? Or what's the number?
I don't know. Again, we're not sure yet. We're talking about that because, unfortunately, you don't ever get 100% response from any surveys. I know when people talk about surveys, if they get 10% back, they're lucky. That's kind of a common thing. So we're just going to have to wait with the responses that we do get back, and we probably will send it out several times if we don't get a good enough response back to remind people. I mean, we're not going to do it once and get 3 back and say, okay, we're done.
But not just the response, but the percent of people who are in favor of it.
Well,
if you get 50% response and 10% of them are in favor,
that's not a majority.
so is consensus majority.
I would think that's probably a reasonable thing. That we get of the responses, do we get that at least a majority is in favor?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we could not go to the select board and say we've sent out, 92 surveys, 40 came back, and 5 are in favor of it, and think that they're going to move forward. Because there's a huge commitment. I'll get to that next part afterwards, from the town's point of view, and a big expense to do this. So we're not going to make it on the expense if people aren't for it. We're not going to move forward.
Will those forms be shared among the population?
Only the residents. You're the only ones that are going to vote on this. This is not.
No, but in terms of responses, are they only for the board to see? I'm sorry. The responses that are made, do they?
They'll be public because we're going
They'll be public, okay.
we're going to discuss them in our meetings. All of our meetings are public. So everything we do on this is going to be public. Yeah. So like I said, so it'll go to select board approval, assuming the select board approves it based on that we got a favorable feedback from the neighborhood. Then what we have to do is we have to prepare an application, a justification form, saying that, because it's like a zoning change, really. It really is a zoning change. So we would prepare an application. We would hire a historic consultant, and he would put the justification. What he'll do is a survey of the neighborhood. Why do you consider it historic? What's the justification in making it a historic district? He'll document every single house. The age, any kind of history in the area that makes the neighborhood outstanding or famous, what happened in that neighborhood. It's a very long application process that the town will actually will have to pay for. That application will go to Mass Historic. We seek Mass Historic's approval. Again, we get their they will look at the justification and then approve the application. And assuming that all those are positive, then it goes to town meeting. And town meeting approves it ultimately because it's a zoning change. So again, this is a long process. There's a lot of work on our part, so we're not taking it lightly. We're not going to move forward if there's opposition to it or people don't want it. We're not going to go through all these steps for something that people don't want. So the easiest part of this is you coming to this meeting and hearing about it and being informed and understanding our process, because the hard part is then coming up after here. So now this is the time we want to hear your input. I mean, this is why we're here. This is why we invited you here. We want to hear your good, bad, and different, what you object about it, what you like about it, what you don't know about it. Just one last thing. Can I just finish thing? I know there's a lot of people, this came up at one of our Zoom meetings. People asked about the list of significant buildings, because a lot of your houses are on the list of significant buildings. And what does that mean? The list of significant buildings is a document that was put together by the Historical Commission several years ago, and we've updated it. But this list of significant buildings is mainly required by the Demolition Delay Bylaw. And what the Demolition Delay Bylaw says, if there's any house outside a historic district that's on this list, if the owner wants to demolish it, they're automatically subject to a 12-month delay. But if they wait the 12-month delay, they're free to do whatever they want. You can never stop a demolition. The only way a demolition can be stopped is through the historic district. But I just wanted to explain, because some people are a little bit confused, like what's the list of significant buildings? I just wanted to explain that to you. So you may be in the list of significant buildings right now. If you became a historic district, that would all go away, because now you have the oversight or protection of the historic district. Sorry, sir.
No problem. My name is John Mannix. I live at 10 Crown Avenue at the corner of Crown and Forest.
Yep.
We have two structures. One is the main house, and one is was the laundromat for the Oakcrest Inn that we did demolish and rebuilt a brand new cottage last year. And I want to comment to your comment that no one else approves the design. However, when we went before the planning board, they were complete ball busters. I mean, they were just asinine comments. I'm in the real estate business, I have been for 30 years, and some of the comments out of the planning board members, they just, in my opinion, talk just to be important. And I'm sure a lot of the people have the same concern here.
Yeah.
That, they're a bunch of idiots. And how do you work with the planning board? I mean, it's nice that you have a friendly tone, and we're supposed to walk out of here with ease, but once we go through the process, it's very difficult.
I'll tell you, from at least from what I know about the planning board process for design review, that's a relatively new thing. I'm not even sure. I think they've codified their design guidelines, that I'm not even sure if they have.
So for the record, my name's Jed Cornock. I'm the town planner here in Falmouth. The planning board does have design guidelines for large-scale commercial buildings, typically. And typically during a planning board hearing, they will get into design elements. But I think Ed's speaking to more the materials that you would use in the historic district. For example, historic homes are traditionally wood. And so the historic district the commission is looking to preserve that. And I think Ed is referring to the fact that they get into more detail about the materials in the design and the character of the design.
Yeah, if in the historic, in the historic districts today, the historical commission takes precedence over design.
So
that's-
to the process, typically an applicant would go before the historic commission first, seek that approval, and then they would come before the planning board for whatever they're proposing to do.
See, the issue, just to clarify a point of between the planning board and the historic commission, the historic commission does not determine land use. So if you were going to construct a new building or you were going to build a condominium or convert a home to a condominium, we don't control that. That is the planning board. So the planning board does have a role even in the historic district. But the design characteristics, materials, like Jed said, that we have the first priority over that purview. So once the land use is determined by the planning board or approved, then it flips over to us for the character and the design character. Now the design, no, let's just clarify one other thing. Design characteristics that we're involved with are only exterior. We do not get involved with interior, and only what's visible from the public way. A public way is the main street. So things like behind in your back door, you're building a deck, you're putting in a new slider in your back door, it's not our concern. Again, because we're concerned about character, the neighborhood character, not the house itself.
Hi. First of all, my name is Mary Erin O'Driscoll, and I'm 46 Deacons Avenue. There's not a lot you can tell me about the history of this area because my family's owned the house for almost 100 years. My grandfather was the owner of the Tower Hotel and had a business in Falmouth for close to 40 years. As I mentioned to you when I wrote to you, and you were very kind to respond, the house is no longer on its original location, nor is it, in its original configuration. It was built in 1924. I understand that's in the light red, but it bothers me that this is the second presentation I've seen where it's wrong. It's not wrong on the website for the town, but the way this is represented and the way it was in the enterprise, the dates look wrong for most of Deacons Avenue. And I think what you're actually picking up there are the salt flats that were there in 1882, but they're not, the house has only been there since 1924. I want to just say a couple of things. I totally respect the work you do. I think historic districts are very valuable. What is hard for me is an external control board making decisions about a house that my family has cared for and taken care of for 100 years. I don't think it's necessary. I do think it's redundant given the level of oversight that we have. And I think the process that you're describing is pretty squishy for an area where many of the homeowners are not able to attend meetings in person during the week. Because they are second homeowners, and that's been explained to you too. I realize you're coming to the Falmouth Heights Mara Vista. I think that's great. About the last reason I'd want a historic district is to control the choices of my neighbors. I don't feel the need to do that. I think they bought property, they get a chance to change it, they have taste, and I think there has been a sense that there are sometimes arbitrary choices that are made. So, for example, when you say the historic homes are traditionally wood, yes, that's right. My house has the original aluminum siding from 1964 on it. When I rebuild it and winterize it, am I going to have to put it back to the clapboard? I think I should be making that decision, not somebody else. And so I appreciate the public piece here. I do think you need more detail on what you're going to get to consensus. And I will say this because when this was proposed some years ago, that piece was handled extraordinarily badly. I'm a board member of the Falmouth Heights Mara Vista Association. I appreciate that you're going to give information. I have strongly suggested they not take a position on this, right? Because unless we inventory every member and have consensus there, the association should not be taking a position. And the last thing I want to say is I really haven't seen any justification for why the boundaries are where they are. I never would have put Deacon's Avenue on this for a number of reasons. Largely because I can tell you when every house was built, and none of them date from the original. Not one of them in their current configuration date from the original colony. That's not true of some of the other houses, but they've been also substantially changed. So thank you for the opportunity to say my piece. I will try not to say anything at the meeting on Saturday because you've heard it from me here. And again, I appreciate the work you do. I realize this is difficult, but I appreciate the chance to be able to voice this. Thank you.
And we appreciate your comments.
Tom Farley from Tower House Road. And I guess first I'd say I'm a little concerned and disappointed that it looks like we have 6 property owners here out of 92, which is not good for such an important decision that we're going to be looking at. And I guess, with that in mind, if this were to move forward, how can it be undone if people, because most people aren't interested and it goes ahead and gets done, and you go through all the steps that you've outlined on a couple of slides previously, can this ever be undone if people feel they were sold a bill of goods, have buyer's remorse? And I just imagine it's a lot more complicated to get out of a historic district than to get in one.
It's actually easier to get out. To get out, I imagine, I mean, it's never happened, but I would imagine that to get out or to undo it, it's just, you have a warrant, it goes back to town meeting.
And it doesn't need to go back through the state.
No. No. All this is just to justify, to get to this point. Once you've got there, you're there. And ultimately, this is where the ultimate decision is being made, is town meeting. So like I said, you could have a citizen's petition, a warrant, you create a warrant, goes to town meeting, and it gets voted on.
Okay,
It's
thank
that
you.
easy. It's that easy.
And could I ask you to go back to slide 5?
I don't know which is slide 5.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Thanks. As you said, the commission was established in 1975, which is 47 years ago. So it makes me wonder why you're just now discovering Crown Ave and Crown Circle.
Well, as was said, there was an attempt, I guess, early on when all the districts were set up. There was an attempt to include Falmouth Heights because of the historic nature of that whole area. I wasn't around in 1975. I don't know how it was handled. From my impression, it would have to be handled very poorly because it was very ugly, from what I understand. But that's all I know about it. So.
Well, that was about 15 years ago, but back in 1975, I think there was no interest in preserving it because it wasn't worth preserving. And what you see now in your second bullet, we love it. Property changed hands. People came in and did, rebuilt, preserved, and retained the character. And we did that without any outside influence.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think people can be trusted to do the right thing. And I guess one more thing, if you would go to the slide that showed the lots by color. If you look closely, you'll see that there's probably not one there that's conforming under current zoning. So it's impossible to knock something down and build a McMansion. Current zoning limits lot coverage, setbacks, height. We don't face that risk here. There've been a number of tear downs, rebuilds. I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, by and large, they were all tastefully done. And again, that's without any outside influence.
Yeah, I think you've been very fortunate, like I said, that the neighborhood has remained as intact as it has. That's not the case in a lot of Falmouth today. It's changing. There's tear downs going on, and like I said, you're very fortunate. That's why we were interested in trying to add another layer of protection to ensure the change, because you can't guarantee what someone else is going to do. Like I said, your neighbors, you might have a great relationship with them, but you can't guarantee it, that's all. You know, I think, like I said, you've been very lucky that people have appreciated what they've got when they come in there. And you just can't guarantee it, that's all my point is, you can't guarantee it. You know, it's fine today, it might not be fine in 3 years or 5 years or... Now, we just had a tear down on approval on Crescent Street, and they're putting a very dramatically different house in there, in the lot. So it could happen. Did you have a question? Sorry. Yeah.
I had a quick
Yeah.
question for you.
Sure.
My name is Dave Buzanowski. I live outside this particular district, but I'm president of the Falmouth Heights Mara Vista Neighborhood Association, and I'm going to hold Mary to her promise. My quick question, and I saw on one slide that 75 of the homes in this 92 home area are considered historic. Is that the word? Or built before a certain date?
By our guidelines, a house that's older than 1950 we consider historic, purely based on age. Okay, so when we were putting this together, and I was going through the neighborhood, the GIS system, the Falmouth GIS system, those are the dates that are included in the system.
So you also mentioned the fact that there are homes in Falmouth in general that are considered or designated as historic. Are those 75 homes that you're talking about designated by the town as historic?
No, I'm saying the Historical Commission looks at the date first.
Right.
Okay, as the first consideration of a historic home. Now, after that, then comes, has the house been changed or altered? So we get a lot of houses now that come into our hearings that are in historic districts that over the years could have been in 1950, you know, before there was a historic district. They changed their windows, they enclosed their porch, they ripped off all the cornices, and they radically changed the house. So even though it might be historic based on its date of origin, we don't consider that to be a historic house any longer because the characteristics that made it historic are gone. And that could exactly be what happened here. But all we can go by at first blush is the date. So if you came into a hearing and you were going to make some changes to your house, and you pointed out and said, gee, you know, I have Anderson 400 windows, and I have these big picture windows to look at the ocean, and they're not historic. Well, that's not a historic house, and we get a very different perspective of how that is handled. We still want it to be respectful of the neighbors, but that's not a historic house from a detailed characteristic perspective. So there's two levels that we look at.
Did you want me to ask that question? Oh, you're for my information. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but does the Historic Commission maintain a list of homes that by address that are considered historic?
No.
It does not?
No.
Okay.
No. We know the houses that are in the historic districts, because we have those listings.
Certainly.
Because those are maintained even by our building department. They have to know those houses. So if someone comes in for a building permit and their address is in an existing historic district, it comes up to the planning board for a review. So we know those houses. But Falmouth we did an inventory in 2017 of historic homes purely based on age. There's 1,500 homes in Falmouth that purely based on age would be considered historic.
Understood.
We have that list. I do have that list because we have the inventory. But like I said, physically, I haven't looked at those houses. They might have been modified over the years. If you remember, a great example, if you remember the Oysters 2 in East Falmouth, that was built over a historic home. So if we looked at the inventory, that showed it as if it was a historic home, but clearly it had been so modified to make it a restaurant, it wasn't anymore. But that's an example of how a historic home got modified and is no longer historic. But when was it built? Maybe 1880, but it's not historic anymore. So that's our first criteria is date, because that's the simplest criteria, but then after that, then we look at the details, and it can change dramatically. And if we have a hearing, it comes up that a house is, the homeowner presents that the details have changed, it's not architecturally historic any longer, we recognize that in the meeting, so that we're not dealing with a historic house anymore. And things, some, alternate materials, synthetic materials can be applied to those houses. So we're much more flexible and we recognize things like that. The changes happen over the years. And we don't stop that. We're not going to make somebody try to make it an original house again. We'd never try to do that. That's not our intention. Like I said, we're not trying to make a museum here.
Does your design characteristics or criteria include size of house? If you have a 1,000 square foot house and you want a 2,000 square foot house built, is that possible with your guidelines?
We don't specifically talk about house. The only time we would even consider something like that, if it was so disproportionate to the neighborhood to be odd. If you're in a neighborhood of, let's say, modest Cape Cod houses, original, early 1900 houses, and someone wants to put up a McMansion, we say, you're going to ruin the neighborhood. That's the only time we look at houses. Size, sorry. We don't look at lot size or lot filling. That's the planning board. Those are zoning criteria. We don't look at those. Did you want to add something, Johanna, to that last comment?
When does a Form B happen? And how does that, when you were asking about a list of documentation of historic homes, that's something that we reference?
What Johanna's talking about is in the Mass Historic Database, they have a list, a historic inventory of all historic properties in Massachusetts. So Falmouth is up there too. So what we do is when we take our inventory of historic houses, we will review those. And then what we do is, if we find a house that's both historic based on its age and its characteristics, both, then what we have created is called a Form B. And what a Form B is, a very detailed snapshot of the house. It talks about its style. We might talk about the architect if we knew what went on in the house, if someone famous lived there, architectural details, the lot size, that kind of thing. So we document that whole process. Again, we pay consultants to do it. It's a very detailed process. But then it's historic date and characteristics. So if you have an 1850 house that the windows have all been changed, the porch is gone, all the details are gone, that's not a historic house to us. So we try to document them as best we can. Then we load that Form B up on Mass Historic's database. So anyone can go, you could go look at your houses up there now, they're there. They might be there, I should say. You can go into the Mass Historic database, it's called MACRIS. You put your address in, and if there's one of these Form Bs, the detailed listing, it'll come up and you'll see a full description of your house, the architectural style of it, and any pertinent details that the consultant could find that was appropriate to your house. So we do try to document it as best we can for the future. So if something happens, if there was a demolition or the house got modified, we knew at some point in time what that house looked like or what it represented. So we do have documentation. But the inventory is 1,500 houses purely based on date in Falmouth. It's a very rich town as far as historic assets, very rich. Most people don't realize that because we have such a big land area and they're pretty much scattered all over the place. But you have areas like Woods Hole and West Falmouth that have 300 or 400 or 500 historic houses in it alone. We have houses that go back to the 1600s in Falmouth, the 1700s in Falmouth, a load of them in the 1800s. I don't know if you realize that the railroad coming to Falmouth this in July of 2022 is 150 years since the railroad came to Falmouth. When the railroad came to Falmouth in the late 1870s, it transformed the town. It went from just a maritime agricultural town, it went into it, became a very famous resort. People were coming here by droves. You know, a lot of houses were built. So a lot of the houses, even in, that's what your neighborhood was developed in the late 1800s as a result of this transformation. People coming here because Falmouth was a resort town now, from Boston and New York. And a lot of the houses that are built in Falmouth are of that period, 1880, 1900, 1910, because the town was booming then. So that's the cause of a lot of our inventory, and they're still there today. And really, yours is one of the last neighborhoods that are still intact in such a very tight, a tight neighborhood and such a, not confined, I don't want to say confined, but such a encapsulated area. It's very unique, and again, we think it's very special.
Ed, maybe now might be a good time to just remind folks that the commission's not made a decision on this. That's why the consensus end of this is still being defined, because they really want to just take it nice and slow and hear your thoughts. So first of all, thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. And second, we'd like to show you the website, the Historical Commission's website. So all of the material that you found here today, in addition to the Zoom meeting that was held back in June, is all listed on the Historical Commission's webpage. So I invite everyone to visit that and share with your neighbors and spread the word, because I believe that the Commission is, planning on talking about this in the meetings to come. So certainly nothing's been decided to date.
Yeah, I'm sorry that there aren't more people here. We specifically set this time and date when we were planning this in April, and we specifically planned an August meeting because of seasonal people. We know that there's a lot of seasonal people there that wouldn't be here in April, and we had our June Zoom meeting. Well, we did our June Zoom meeting so that people who don't live here would be able to participate. And then we specifically set this meeting so the seasonal people that would most likely be here, we were trying to help give them the opportunity to come as well. So that's why we set these times and dates, just to make sure that people would have the access that we need them to have, would like them to have. Okay.
You're going to wonder why the weather came up.
Yeah.
That's because I searched for it. So under boards and committees, simply go down to the Historical Commission. On the left-hand side, the banner, Potential Concept Historic District. This is the meeting that we have tonight. So it's the agenda. The previous meeting here is a YouTube video. It was on Zoom. The presentation that you have on the table, as well as the letters that were sent to all the members of the neighborhood. Everything's here. And so tonight, FCTV has recorded us. We plan on putting that video up on this webpage and sharing all that information as we move forward. All of it.
Can you maybe bring up a GIS just to show where we got the information from, just so if people wanted to check and look themselves, I don't know if people are familiar with the GIS system.
So in case you missed that, it's under Departments. Go to Geographic Information System. Scroll down.
Public Interactive right above it.
That's the one. Interactive GIS Suite. Then you got to click on this image here. Short disclaimer. It's going to give us a tour. We don't want it today. But you can simply zoom in, so we'll just go right to your neighborhood. And then over here on themes, there's all sorts of information that you can click on, layers of all sorts of different information. But for example, if you click on this, you can hover over a property and it will give you just some of the brief information. But if you click on, let's just pick this one here. So this is 15 Melrose. This is all the GIS information. It's actually from the assessor's database. This is the information that we use to create that map. And so I think it was Mary
Yeah, I don't understand if the assessor says it's 1924, why it's showing up in the
What,
color.
what was your address? We'll look it up.
4060 Avenue.
46, you said?
Yeah, 46. Right.
Yeah.
But if you look on the map, the color looks like it's 1800.
Looks pink. No? Depends on the definition of color.
The dark,
But that's in the thing, that's in the,
no, yours is the next one down.
no, that's exactly where it is.
Right here, right, this one?
No, if you look, go to the corner lot of Burke.
Right here?
Yes. Why is there any dark red?
Yeah, so I think it's important just to note, so the dark red is this one, and that refers to 1800s. This is a lightish red, so pink, and this is that guy right here.
But what is the dark color?
There's the, that's the image of the house behind it. It's overlaid on the house.
I don't think that's particularly, I think between those two things it's confusing. I mean, I appreciate you going through that, I do.
Yeah.
But it,
Yeah.
Yeah,
The same thing
better
would
color.
be true at the end of the house. It looks at the end of the street, it looks as if there's a dark red in the thing. I understand now that you
Yeah.
pointed it out, but this should be very good.
Yeah.
We originally started with a multicolor map, but we felt it was a little busy. We had pinks and purples.
Yeah.
Hear your point.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there any other questions concerns? You're not hurting our feelings, believe me. They have thick skins, believe me.
He heard you.
You were just kidding.
Yeah, Mason.
So, my name's Mason Wilcox. I have a home in the historical district in North Falmouth, and I'm right next to the Bourne Farm. And when I first moved to this town, I was scared of being in the historical district because of, I felt like I had handcuffs the second I moved into town about 10 years ago. But I have been very happy being in the district. One, the planning department's been awesome to work with over the years. I've been able to upgrade my house, make changes. I even built a new barn next to my house from the original one that was 1900s and was falling down. I don't think, besides a window discussion that I had before I was on the commission, that we came to a pretty good agreement on one small window on my property. I've never had any issues with anything the commission had recommended to me to make changes to, and I had accepted. And the other nice part is, I don't have to worry about big plastic houses going up in my neighborhood up and down North Falmouth Highway. That's my biggest fear, is seeing these, vinyl plastic structures that just don't keep the character of my neighborhood. And that's part of the reason why I like living in North Falmouth, in the historical district. So, just different perspective than someone who's lived in one for 10 years.
Thank you. All set? Thank you. Again, I hope you talk to your neighbors. It's, like I said, it's unfortunate that we didn't get more people to hear this, because I think it's important for them to hear it. We certainly have any public meeting that they want to come to and have any more, bring questions, we're happy to deal with it. And like I said, it'll be on every agenda now for the next couple of months. So,
I have them email us too. We actually care what you have, we really want to hear what you all have to say about it. That's what we care about.
And the meetings are scheduled
Yeah.
on the first
Tuesday.
Tuesday in September. We're gonna be the day after Labor Day. Day after Labor Day, we get together again.
Yeah.
And we review emails and letters that come in. So if you do, over the course of the month, send letters to us, we get copies of those printed and we review them during the meeting. So often people will write in a letter in support or against a project.
And
I just think that historical district and what it means to them and what changes they can make and how strict or, I mean, obviously you want to maintain the look, but how strict does that get? I think that's where people get really nervous. And I think maybe it's a misunderstanding, but I think it would go a long way to, I don't know how you give a greater education of that, but maybe case studies of homes in historical districts and changes that were made to show the kind of input that you all have. Just a suggestion.
I th-
I was going to say, come to a meeting and see how it goes.
Now, I live in the historic district. I live in the West Falmouth Historic District. I have a contemporary house. It's a 1983 house, but it's in the historic district. So they coexist. You know, the houses coexist. There's different styles, different ages. If you drive around the historic district, if you drive through Woods Hole, you drive through West Falmouth, you'll see contemporary homes. In Sippawisset, Quisset, there's contemporary homes. Again, we're not trying to make a museum out of the town. We have very, very contemporary homes that coexist with colonial homes. And it's all about the materials, it's about design and style, and they live together very nicely. You go through, because that's the way our neighborhoods are. If you go into Falmouth Center, the Green, there's colonials, there might be Victorians, there's Greek revivals. There's no one style of house in Falmouth, and we recognize that. So we think it's perfectly normal. There should be different style of houses that live side by side, as long as they're compatible and they respect each other. That's all we try to do. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.